I want to talk about laws that this world needs and just the importance of law in general. Typically, laws reflect what a society prioritizes. What they make laws against are things that they have disdain for. What they don't make laws for is what they are okay with, what they tolerate. America has been a lawless society. We have basic laws of the jungle that keep people from murdering other people, but we don't really have much beyond that. This is because the men who made America, let me give you some basic facts about many of the, in quotes, founding fathers. They were adulterers. A lot of them had mistresses. They were in constant adultery. So, of course, there's no laws about adultery in our country. They were slave owners, so meaning they're hypocrites, because they would say things like, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal." Well, except those men over there who make me lots of money. They exploited people. They were greedy, and they were hypocrites. Period. You cannot say that men are created equally while still owning slaves. It is a disgusting hypocrisy, so they were hypocrites. They were all pretty much greedy. Many of them suffered from great pride, ego. Thomas Jefferson even decided to write his own Bible. That is, I could never even imagine trying to pull something like that off. You have got to be worshipped by your culture and suffer from pride to think that you are in a position to make up your own Bible. For those who don't know, he cut out he butchered the New Testament, the Gospels. He took out all of Jesus' miracle stories. He basically reduced Jesus to a moral teacher. But I say this, if Jesus was just a moral teacher, he would have not been remembered by history. Lots of moral teachers came and went, but not all of them rose from the dead. Only one of them did. That's why we remember Jesus, because it was more than just good teachings. Okay? There was a resurrection involved. But Thomas Jefferson felt he was of the authority to remove all of the miracles from the New Testament. This is evil. Let me just make this plain. The people who made America were evil. I know I'm speaking blasphemy in America, but let's get real. They were hypocrites. They were greedy, full of pride. And so they made laws and a system of government that basically protected their way of life. But it is not parallel or consistent with the law of God that is written on the heart of someone who belongs to God. They do not punish severe things like sexual immorality or adultery. They treat monetary theft like it's the most important thing, How dare you steal? Not knowing that the poor person might just be doing it to live. But how dare you? So that's strange. In this country, adultery, which is the crime that is the destruction of one's family, you're betraying your spouse and destroying your own family, which actually destroys societies, which should be at least a felony, which under Old Testament law was punishable by death, in this society is not a crime at all. And yet if a poor person steals from the rich to try to survive, they will go to jail. This is very odd, and it's very inconsistent with the heart of God. And so I want to talk about law proposals that I've talked about for many years. And I'm going to try to do this and say this like I've never said it before. I know many times I'll say, I've said this once, I'll say it again. I'll try to do it from scratch, okay? And I'll try to explain the purpose for them. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is I came across the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He had a little video that just... I disagree with him on a lot of things. Like, he thought Jesus was a capitalist. No, Jesus wasn't. Jesus was a communist. That's why the early church were called communes. That's even where we get the word communism from, ironically, is the communes of Christianity. Jesus taught to basically take what you need to live and give the rest away to the poor, to those who need it the most. John the Baptist taught that the man who has 2 shirts should give one of his shirts to the man who has none. They were communists. Period. Jesus, John the Baptist, the whole Christian movement, they were communists. They were not capitalists. But there's a lot of very deluded people in America who love money, and the love of money just corrupts a person's mind. It causes them to become delusional. They see things not the way they are. Jesus is literally saying, woe to you who are rich. The comfort you've received now is the only comfort you're ever going to get. But blessed are you who are poor. The kingdom of heaven belongs to you. How hard it is for a wealthy man to enter the kingdom of heaven. He tells the rich man to give all of his wealth away to the poor, and then he can follow him, but the rich man wouldn't do it. I mean, how many more clues? If you look at all of the Gospels, Jesus is continually condemning the rich for their love of money, their lack of empathy, and how they think they love money basically more than God. Where's the proof? You have to give it up. You have to sacrifice it. Jesus had to sacrifice his body on the cross to prove he was who he was. The least you can do is sacrifice some of your comfort. It's really not even close. But yeah, prove it. You say you love God more than money? Prove it. That's all I got to say to the rich. Prove it. Because there are no proud spirits in heaven. And there are basically no wealthy people in heaven. I'm not saying comfortable or well-to-do. I mean wealthy, like billionaires especially, people who have well more than their means. Anyway, I don't want to get off subject here. Well, no, this is kind of on subject because this is actually what I'm going to talk about later on with some of the laws that I propose. But anyway, the author of this book, of the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, he really asked finally a question I liked when he said, what does God want? And he's right when he said, when you're young, all you think about is, what do I want to do? What do I want? And when we're young, that's what we do. It's like being a little baby. Little babies are just, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, wah, they cry if they don't get it in time, etc. And so that's true when you're young. This is natural. Not saying it's right, but it's natural. But when you get older, you've kind of gotten tired of that. You've spent usually a good chunk of your life pursuing that, and now you feel like there's something more now. And you start to ask that question for those people who have faith. What does God want? This is the right question to ask. He did get this one thing right. This is one thing I agree with him. Now, his answers were wrong. And he continues to hold on to his wealth. But he did ask this one question that I agree with. What does God want? That's the question that us, especially older people, over the age of 40, maybe even 30, if you're kind of ahead of your years, but especially over the age of 40, what does God want? What does God want for this world? What does God want for the people in your life? And you could even say, what does God want for your own life? But I would like to almost put it in that, well, probably the order of what does God want for the people in your life is probably the top one, because that's the one you have the most impact on. What does God want for the world, which is more of a big picture goal? And then what does God want for your own life, which is actually the least of priorities? This is most consistent with how Jesus behaved. He put his own life as the lowest priority. So, something to think about. So for me, one of the things that came to my mind was, what does God want? God would want a society. It hurts my heart to say this because I'm thinking, wow, this is so idealistic. Especially when you look at young people today, you're like, I am dreaming right now, but just bear with me, okay? Dream with me for a little bit. Maybe we can get there over decades or centuries, maybe, okay? But let's look at a goal that's worth moving towards, okay? A society where there is love, where there is fairness, where there is empathy, where people know who God is, I think would be a beautiful society. In such a society, they could make laws that I'm about to suggest, and it would not hurt them. It would only preserve the society so that if they go through some kind of a spiritual cold season for a couple decades, at least the laws will provide a framework to keep the society functioning as it should, even when they themselves maybe are in decline. And so some of these first laws, we have one of them already. So we've already agreed that one of these actually makes a lot of sense, and that's a minimum wage. You know, for a long time, there was no minimum wage. That's madness that an employer can literally just pay you jack squat, and they say, well, if you don't like it, you go find somewhere else. But if everyone else is paying you jack squat, but a minimum wage, just enough to be able to survive. Wow, what an idea, that people who do the hardest work in society have to be paid at least enough to survive. It's amazing how it probably was like pulling teeth just to get that. Okay, but I propose also a maximum wage. I propose a minimum wage of $10,000 a year and a maximum wage of $100,000 a year. And all the excess goes to needs first. But then there won't be any more pro ball players. Yeah, there will. They still want to get paid $100,000 a year to just throw a ball around. People will still want to be a doctor because it'll still pay 10 times more than your average off the street job. It's just the wealth disparity won't be so ridiculous amongst the. It'll be a 1 to 10 ratio in terms of income. So there's the maximum wage proposal, which is in line with Jesus's teaching of taking care of people's needs, caring about other people. See, the problem is people are selfish and they won't help others. They always say that they will if we had the freedom to, but then they don't. So I've learned when it comes to money, there is no honor in the honor system, period. You have to have laws to enforce these things so that people don't starve, go homeless, etc. You have to have laws because there is no generosity amongst the greedy, just as there's no honor amongst thieves. It's just not. Okay. Which brings me to the next law, which I believe is the most important one of everything I suggest. A $1 million asset cap. Every individual is only allowed to own $1 million worth of stuff. Why an asset cap? This makes society based off of, it caps how much damage. Wow, too many thoughts at once. So you only need really one house. But with this rule, it's kind of like saying, well, you can still have two houses. One on the East Coast, one on the West Coast, whatever. You could have two nice houses. Now, house prices would obviously immediately plummet from anywhere from $1 to maybe $900,000, because if you'd go to prison for having more than $1 million worth of stuff, nobody's going to want to try to sell their house for $1.1 million, because then they would basically go straight to jail the moment they get the money from that house sale. So it'll actually cause house prices to range within reason too. That's another upside to this. One of the big upsides, before I forget, is you would have a political system that is now basically incorruptible, because if they have already made enough money within their career before going into politics, or from their income from being in politics, then they don't have much extra money that they can make left. And there's not it wouldn't take, like, bribing a politician would be kind of pointless, because if they're close to their $1 million limit, or let's say they're already at like 900,000, and everything they work for then has to be donated from that point. What's going to happen is you're going to have politicians no longer being able to be bribed. There's no conflict of interest with the love of money and political leadership. So this system, what it does is it allows people some space to still have nice things, but it also makes sure then all the excess then goes towards people's needs. It gets better. Yeah. Jesus said that interest is a sin. He said that when you loan something to somebody, like money, in most cases, to not ask for anything in return, he's referring most likely to interest. I doubt he's referring to the entire loan. It's very likely he is talking about interest. And for a long time, the Catholic Church benefited off of interest, and this is actually one of Martin Luther's gripes with the Catholic Church, and many people's gripes with the Catholic Church over a long time, was the hypocrisy of the Catholic Church, that they on one hand claim to be Christian, but then they don't follow what Christ taught. And this is actually why our system of interest is sinful, why it creates a system of slaves. And you cannot call the system Christian if it continues to allow and legalize interest. Any company collecting any form of interest should be illegal. And you don't even have to be a Christian to understand the ethics in this. We all know how they being like the banking world, has used, and credit card companies and everybody else, has used interest to enslave the population. Now, when you buy a house, you have to buy 2.5 houses for the price of one, and all that money goes to the slave owner. If interest was illegal, what a person could do is open a 0% interest loan through the government for their house and pay only towards the principal. They would pay that house off so fast. There'd be no waste. There'd be no middleman companies taking all of the money. It would just be you. Look, how many people... Sorry, too many thoughts at once. This isn't like the year 0 BC where you can loan somebody something and they might just make off with your goat, and you take a loss. And so loaning, the argument for interest is you got to have interest because you're going to have loss. So the interest makes up for the loss. But they weren't doing that to break even. They had interest for the purpose of profit. So I call nonsense on that when they say, well, we've got interest just so we don't go broke. The U.S. government, for example, if you try to run away from the U.S. government, I doubt it's not the same, even close to the same, as a guy in the Middle East who made off with a goat. The U.S. government will know where you went. And if you just stop paying on the loan for the house, they just take the house then, as like the bank would, until you can start paying it again, or something to that effect. But zero interest needs to be illegal if we are to be consistent with what Jesus taught. Again, you don't even have to be a Christian to understand the benefits of the many laws that I'm proposing here. But what I am proposing is parallel to the heart of God. Speaking of that, I want to get off of money issues for right now. Adultery should be at least a felony. That's right. I know, it's shocking. Shocking. For I'd say at least almost 10 years now, I believe this. And for somebody who just heard this, they're like, what? But as they start to think about it and they try that puzzle piece on, they're like, it kind of makes sense. Yeah. So you have families in America who have been completely destroyed because of selfish, cheating people. When you commit adultery, or not you, but when a person commits adultery, they are betraying a marriage contract. They are destroying their own family for their own little selfish getting off. This should be a crime. It should be a serious crime because a family and the family unit is the fabric of a society. If you allow adultery, you allow the fabric of your society to be very weak. The society itself collapses. You have fatherless children everywhere. You have broken homes everywhere. Now, here's the thing. People are still going to cheat. I'm not naive. I know that. It will statistically reduce it, though. The risk won't be worth the reward, especially considering how often people get caught cheating. It will reduce. But more importantly, people who do wrong will have to face the consequences of wrong. The law is supposed to avenge the person who is wronged, in theory, that's what the law is supposed to do. It is supposed to avenge those who were wronged. But right now there is absolutely no law for adultery, almost implying as if adultery is not wrong and implying that nobody was hurt in adultery. And we all know that's not true. In fact, usually the person is so hurt on the receiving end, they feel like killing the other person. That is because they understand how serious a crime that person committed at heart. They know. That is how serious of a crime it is. According to the law of Moses, adultery is punishable by death. So me saying 4 years in prison and a felony is actually a slap on the wrist. I'm being nice with these suggestions, The perversion of our youth needs to stop, needs to end. Now, what I'm about to say is going to be very controversial, even considered bigoted, but I am again proposing ideas that are much more soft than Moses' laws. If you don't know what the death penalty comes to the people that I'm about to suggest, so now you can understand that my suggestions are more merciful, more gracious. Homosexuality, it is immoral. It's also a serious crime in God's eyes. If everybody was gay, we would cease to exist. It is a perversion of nature. Okay, people could say that it's a victimless crime, but that's not true. The victims are the two people in the gay relationship, and every situation is different, complicated. But I just know that is where the victims lie. They should be put into their own city. Now, it's kind of funny and ironic. They kind of already do that. I used to always joke about this with a friend. I called it Gay Island. We need a island, and we just send all the gay people there. And I said, they'll be happier, we'll be happier. If I was living in a world where almost everybody was gay and I was one of the few straight people and it was a crime to be straight, not that it would merit jail time, but that they would simply just say, are you knock on the door, hi, is this so-and-so? Like, yes. We have a claim that you're straight, you're heterosexual. Is that true? Like, yes. Okay, well, you're going to need to pack your things. We're gonna take you to Straight Island. I'd be happy with that arrangement. Finally, a target-rich environment. I get to be around my people. I don't have to be around all the gay people. Always wondering, is that woman straight or not? Because in most cases, she's probably not. So now they put me in a target-rich environment. This is best for everyone. So I've always thought about homosexuality. You need Gay Island. It's just a segregation. That's it. Transsexuality is a mental illness. I don't know how to say this any nicer, but when a person identifies as something that they are not, they are mentally ill in a way that is actually very detrimental to society. I can identify as a duck. That doesn't make me a duck. I can identify as a black man. That doesn't make me a black man. I'm a white man. I know. I just lost like 50% of viewers right there. He's a white man. Oh, what does he know? You can tell by my voice. Come on, you knew. But I could identify as a black man. That doesn't make me black. But on a DNA level, I'm a white man. I'm a white man. It doesn't change your chromosomes. Now, it's true that gender roles are a construct in terms of what roles each gender is expected to do. That is a society thing. Sure, Native Americans were kind of more of a matriarchy. The women were, when the man married, he went to the woman's family, and the woman kind of, ran the family and that sort of thing. And so, sure, other societies, there have been different roles for different genders. And so that part, I can agree, is a construct. But as for your DNA, your hardware, you are the way you're born. And no mutilation of your genitals is going to change that. Your DNA is the way it is. Your chromosomes, even your brain. Did you know that a male and a female brain are different? So you can change your genitals, but your brain is still going to be the gender that you were born as. And it's different from the other gender. And so this is all just people fooling themselves. And the hatred of truth in our society is so strong that they wouldn't even allow me to express this idea. They say that that's hateful. No, it's not. It is, well, actually, no, it's not even my opinion. It's a medical fact that men and women have different chromosomes and that their brains are different. This is a fact. This is a medical fact. So it's not my opinion. But even if it was not a fact and it was just my opinion, that's supposedly supposed to be protected by the First Amendment in this country, free speech. It's really a travesty that the First Amendment is a joke. They say, well, if you hurt someone's feelings, then you don't have free speech. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. The fact that we're allowing this mental illness around young kids is another detrimental thing that is going on. You've got a small percentage of the population that is perverted, that is sexually immoral, that they don't like being the minority, so what they're trying to do is grow their numbers over time by trying to influence the young and influential to their mentality. I think last I heard is 1 in 10,000 people have the hormone imbalance, so that a man is very feminine and that a woman is very masculine. And yet, it's strange because 1 in 300 Americans claims to be gay, so there's a mismatch there. That means 99% of the people claiming to be gay are not born gay. They're not born with a hormonal imbalance. They've just chosen to be that way. We've all known that it's a choice. It's a choice. At some point in their life, something was perverted. It's a choice. Anyway, I don't want to get off on the subject. It'd be best if gay people lived in their own city, in their own society. It just would be. And trans people probably need to be put away and definitely should not be allowed near children. So there's that. War. Here's a good one. War should be something that the people vote on, not even Congress. Going to war is a very important thing. I'm tired of seeing centuries of nonsense wars in America, imperialist America. I'm tired of it. It should be something that the people vote on, and if you vote for war, you get put on the draft list. If you voted against war, you're not put on the draft list. It is immoral to make somebody fight against their will. It is immoral to make somebody murder against their will. If this is not a war worth fighting, the people are not going to want to fight it. If the people believe that this is a war worth fighting, then more people will want to fight it. To make people fight a war they do not think is worth fighting or could be won is wrong. It's immoral. I don't know how they got away with a draft in Vietnam. Really, I don't. How you can make somebody murder against their will. It's bad. That needs to go. The whole idea of a draft should always be illegal. Or at the very least, like I said, people vote on war, and the people who vote for war can be drafted. That would be fair. Which means the people who vote on war are only the people who are going to be capable of fighting a war. So all these old guys who make lots of money off wars, they don't even get to vote for war. They can't. If they can't fight, they don't vote. And that also means women too. If women are not going to be drafted, if women aren't going to fight, they don't get to vote for war either. So basically, males from the age of 18 to, I don't know, somewhere in the 40s, whatever the cutoff is for most drafts, that age range of males, they get to vote for war. And if they voted for war, they get drafted, or they can be drafted. How is this not fair? You know what's unfair is old men talking and young men dying. You know what's unfair is old men benefiting off of war while young men die for them. But that's kind of how this country was founded, so it's no surprise it's been going on like that. Our current system says it doesn't believe in cruel and unusual punishment. I find that strange because the criminal most likely did a very cruel and unusual crime. I do not understand how they are allowed that grace. Would you agree that the fair sentence for any crime is to have the same thing done to them? Yeah, I don't know how you, I know in some cases I don't know how you would enforce that as a state, but I would think that as close as you can get it, is the way it should go. I think that it's a complete waste of resources, though, to have all these people in prisons their whole life. All their meals paid, all their air conditioning, all this stuff just sitting around in a prison their whole life, especially for things that are not, things that are like victimless crimes, like drug possession. If anything, they just need to go to rehab. You know, when the victim is themselves, it's kind of hard. When there's no other person that's a victim, I don't know how you have people in prison for that kind of thing. So there's that. Another idea is I do believe that the necessities of life, food, water, shelter, fire, should be gradually turned to nonprofit over time. So everybody basically needs gasoline to function in the society, to drive their vehicle. The fact that we pay such huge profit margins, it's like 95% profit or something like that. For every dollar you pay at the pump, 5 cents of it is actually going to the gasoline, and 95% is going to profit for the gas companies. This is madness. This needs to be turned nonprofit. See, people are fearful of big government doing these kind of things, but the way I see it is, if big government keeps you from having to pay less at the pump, then in this scenario it's better. But nonprofit is the way to go for utilities, your heating, your cooling, your electricity, your gas. The government should start to nationalize these things and turn them into nonprofit. We don't need companies, we don't need these middlemen anymore who scalp the population and profit off of everybody else. We don't need them. Just slowly accumulate these companies, turn them nonprofit. Because the other thing is, if it's publicly owned by a government, everything can be scrutinized. You vote for who's in charge of it, etc. You could also see how the money's being used. You can see if there's money being siphoned or wasted or whatever. But when it's a private company, they can do what they want with the profit. And so it's waste. It's for the general population, it's waste. Profit is waste. So yeah, to turn all essentials into nonprofit. I'm sure there are other ideas. I know there are other things I've thought about in the last decades of my life, but I'm most excited about the asset cap. I know that sounds funny, but I am. I think that this is probably the most essential thing a society needs. And the reason why, the reason why these laws will never be, I don't think anytime soon be accepted? Because people have not suffered from the lack of laws in these departments long enough. Now we're starting to see a lot of men, especially seeing how, that's another one I forgot to talk about, alimony. Yeah, so since women initiate 80% of divorces, I'm going to say if anyone initiates a divorce, it's generally women. If someone initiates divorce, they should also be forfeiting any rights to any kind of benefit of any kind. So if they wanted to divorce the man, they get no alimony, they get nothing. If they initiate the divorce, they get nothing. Now, on the flip side to that, if the other person was cheating, then the person who's the victim of being cheated on automatically is entitled to the benefits of. So if the rich person, and we'll leave the gender out of this, if the rich person is cheating and the poor person in that marriage, so to speak, the one who wasn't making all the money is cheated on, then that person does get alimony, like a severance package. I also don't understand how alimony is like a 10-year or lifelong thing. That's madness. The whole original idea of alimony was they're used to a certain form of lifestyle, which I always thought was odd. What is that? No, cap it to minimum wage or something like that. They're used to a certain lifestyle. Well, then they shouldn't have divorced the guy if they were wanting to keep that lifestyle. Oh, they wanted to keep the same lifestyle without the guy, so they breached they threw out their marriage contract. Okay. No, there needs to be a limit on the time the alimony is going forward, like 6 months, equivalent to unemployment, and you could even cap the alimony amount to the state minimum wage. If the person wants to be divorced that bad, money should not be the reason, and it should not be a lifelong retirement. Women have turned marriage into a racket. Men don't want to get married because they are continually being abused by women under this current system, which favors women in every way, whether it be child custody rights, you don't have that, child custody laws, to just who gets what in a marriage. And generally, since men, over history anyway, not so much in recent times, but over history, men have brought more money into the house since women are pregnant and stay home, and back in the 50s, their jobs, they just didn't have access to jobs like they do nowadays. But yeah, alimony, it really needs to be capped. The limits on it are ridiculous. If a person initiates divorce, they don't get any benefits. If a person was cheated on, they automatically get benefits, etc. So, well, the person who did the cheating and committed cheating, what a cute word. Like you cheated at a game of Monopoly. Adultery. I love that word because it just sounds more serious. Adultery. Not cheating. Oh, you got caught cheating. No. Adultery is a crime. It's a felony. And while they're doing their 4 years in prison, the person who was cheated on lives off of the savings, finance, whatever that person in prison had. It's kind of even an extra incentive to not cheat. But anyway, yeah, I'm most excited about the asset cap for a number of reasons. One, it makes the political system stronger. Politicians are harder to be bribed. That's a huge kind of hidden bonus. But the biggest one is we can make sure that everyone's needs in society are met. People still have as much as they need to live, even comfortably so. The limit could be lower. It will cause houses and everything to range within a reasonable price. You combine this with zero interest loans through the government for a house, you basically be buying a much cheaper house with no interest. So if you study to be a doctor and you make $100,000 a year, since that's the limit in this society, you within 10 years of labor, so to speak, you can reach your max, your limit, your resource limit. You could probably retire in 9 years. You have a house paid off in 5 years because you paid only principal on the thing. Well, it came in at 5, but 6 or 7. An argument towards some of this is, well, then the slaves just won't be working as much. I'm not concerned about that. I'm not trying to promote a slave society. I'm not trying to keep the slaves busy like these evil people who run the world. I don't care about that. That's their problem. They have an empire they like to run and own, and I am against it. Jesus is against it. They're going to be going to hell if they don't repent. So I don't care about, but I won't have slaves anymore. That's the other thing too, is slavery never ended. It just expanded. Your rent or your mortgage is your slavery. It's who you are a slave to. And if you stop working, if you stop being a slave, guess what? There go your slave quarters. There goes your way to well, I know you can get food stamps, but for at least for a little while, your way to get food. Your slave quarters, your food, your all of your livelihood if you just stop working. And they lock you into like a 30-year slave contract if it's a mortgage. And if it's rent, it's just lifelong. You're not even starting to count the time down. And most people are forced into rent because they don't have the income or resources to even try to get a house anymore. The other issue is we see more and more families who have money buying more and more properties to make slaves out of people through their rentals. Because rent is immoral. It's a form of slavery indirectly. One person works, the other person takes the fruit of the labor. It's immoral. If there was an asset limit, then there would be no need to make any laws against rent, because then people, not really anyway, because then people couldn't go over a certain amount, meaning they could still rent something temporarily for a time being, and that would still be legal. But once they get to that $1 million mark, well, you have all these wealthy families that buy more and more property, and so they're able to compete with higher prices, and your average guy can't buy a house. There's always somebody else out there with more money who can make a higher offer, and then the seller goes with a higher offer, and so people who already have more than they need get even more, and the people that wish they could just even buy a house to lock in a 30-year slave agreement, they don't even get that, and they're just burning up money every month. They're burning up labor every month. They're a slave. It's a slave society, and I would really love to end this slave society. Make no mistake, we are living in a slave society. We are living in Sodom and Egypt, for those of you who understand that biblical reference. We are living in Sodom and Egypt. The American empire is Sodom and Egypt. It tolerates sexual immorality, and it is actually a very oppressive, slave-driven society whose motivations are sex and money. Yeah. So back to what I started this on. What does God want? I would love to see a society like this. I probably never will. I don't think I'm delusional. I know that I will, for the rest of my life, I will probably not see a society like this. And the reason I would argue why I won't see a society like this is because people still love money. They have not suffered enough. They have not suffered enough from being a victim of adultery or divorce or anything like that. They have to all suffer enough until there's more of a unanimous decision that, hey, there needs to be consequences for people who hurt people like this. What did I say? Law and the system of law is supposed to avenge those who have been wronged, who have been hurt. Not hurt feelings. I mean, hurt. I guess you could say adultery is hurt feelings, but it is legitimate hurt feelings. It's not just, oh, he called me a human being when I identify as a duck. I'm not talking about hurting your delusion. I'm talking about violating your trust, breaking you for the ability to ever trust someone of the opposite gender, and taking all your resources into divorce after cheating. We live in a lawless time. How many times do I hear stories about women who they'll marry a man, cheat on him, divorce him, initiate divorce, and then take half of his stuff? What is this nonsense? Under the system I'm proposing, they would get nothing. In fact, they would get 4 years. It would clean things up quickly. People do not have a fear of right and wrong in this society. This is how I know they're A, godless, and B, not going to get any better. What I'm proposing, again, is only half of the equation, I know. Half of it is law, which is kind of creates the form, or it's like the structure around it's like the mold. There we go. That's the word I'm looking for. It's like the mold. But the other half is what's on the inside. And if the people are still rotten, I need to mention pornography needs to be illegal. Absolutely, 100%. Pornography must be illegal. The damage is probably too late, but better late than never. Pornography can be accessed by any young person. It would be better, and I'm not saying prostitution should be legal. I'm not saying that, but it would be better that prostitution was legal and pornography be illegal, rather than the other way around. In fact, we live in a madness society where if you hired a prostitute, and let's say in this scenario, the police kick down the door and say, freeze, you're under arrest for prostitution. And we're like, no, you got it all wrong, officer. You get your little camera out and say, we were just filming porno. And he's like, oh, well, in that case, go carry on. That's legal. How much sense does that make? That you could be filming sexual content that any child can gain access to on their phone or their parents' app or something like that. And that is legal, but then something between two consenting adults is illegal? It's upside down. It is really upside down. I want to say that prostitution is immoral. I want to say that all form of sex work is immoral. It's immoral, and it's not ideal. I think also it caters to the worst. It caters to the worst. I believe in higher standards. I believe that we should have families. I believe there should be love. I believe in a better world. I also think that prostitution should still be illegal, but the penalties should be very mild. It's unfortunate, but pornography should be very severe. Absolutely, because it has destroyed our society. You've got so many people on both genders that view sex and relationships with it's burnt them out. It's made them weird. And a lot of women who watch porn, they don't admit that they do, but they do. And now they only want guys who remind them of what they've seen in their videos. Nobody says this. It's kind of an unspoken. It's why all these women are going for Chad now. It's the dating apps, which leads me to another thing. The internet needs to be heavily restricted. Anything such as, and I know this is going to cause a lot of people to just go, wait. We're on board with all of these until this part, but let me explain why this is necessary. Everything from OnlyFans needs to be illegal. Dating apps need to be illegal. People just are not responsible to use them right. They turned into a hookup. They're basically a breeding ground for fornication, which should be a misdemeanor. Fornication should be a misdemeanor. It's hard to enforce. You'd have to have some kind of self-reporting system where the first of two people in the couple to report doesn't get as much consequences, something like that. But that's a hard one to enforce, so I figured just leave that alone. That also turn a lot of people off. But if you can cut down on how the fornication is exploding, such as dating apps, that might be a better way to go. Social media, Facebook, all this stuff, gone. Our society, people want to say that it was the internet that tanked our society, and there's a lot of truth to that because most of what was on the internet was what? Pornography, social media, dating apps, hookup sites, sex work like OnlyFans kind of stuff. And that's what most of the internet has been used for, sexual immorality. And if you have a heart of God, you have no heart for this, and you have no problem with this being illegal. Only the evil one will sit there and try to justify why a society needs pornography, why it needs access to people in a hookup culture, why it needs platforms that allow people to feel constant envy and jealousy like social media stuff. People were not ready for the technology. I do not know if they ever will be. I think the internet is great when it comes to being able to access information and learn things. And I think YouTube is, well, it's CensorTube, but it's not, look, YouTube is not perfect, but the idea of what YouTube is, people being able to just post their own videos, is fine as long as they make sure they keep it clean and make sure it's not some softcore porn like a lot of these ASMR channels have become over the last 10 years. It's ridiculous. Well, 5 years, I should say. It's ridiculous. You know, it's free softcore porn that always, you know, links you to some other, what's one of those sites that they use to get money or to get paid money. Anyway, there are things on the internet that are fine. YouTube is okay. That's a gray area, but it's okay. Playing computer games is okay. Getting information on how to do things, learning about things is okay. Tutorials on how to do things, it's okay. This is all fine. But as for all the filth, the pornography, the OnlyFans, social media, all this filth, gone, banned, not allowed. Of all the things that I suggested, I don't know. I'm thinking if I had to pick if only one could get there, I was like, man, that asset cap is really, really important to end people's suffering. It will end homelessness. It will end hunger. All that extra resources can go towards more worthwhile things. And that's the beauty of it too, is you would have the ability to decide where the money goes to. Because like if you know you're about to go over, there could be like a 30-day buffer period where you're now over and you don't go to jail until that 30 days is up and if you still have the money. So you have 30 days to find a cause that you want to donate the money to. And so what would happen is you would have, and a cause that's not, not like a bunch of prostitutes. I'm just trying to, every time I think about rules, you always have to think about there's a guy out there who's going to try to find every way to break the rule. You know, I come up with a bunch of noble rule suggestions, law suggestions. There are trolls out there. It is their mission in life to find a way to break the system. It's one thing I've learned when modifying computer games and you know just making computer games is there is going to always be that guy out there that just plays the game the way it was not intended at all and just completely exploits it. And sometimes it's a total flop, but sometimes, wow, they found something how the game can be broken. Gonna have to fix that. That's the thing, gonna have to fix that. The problem is we live in a society where there are no fixes, there are no patches, there are no updates. When there is an imbalance, society has just left it. And we have basically sacrificed children for this. Pornography. It is because of pornography that, now I was not heavily influenced by pornography at a young age, but My friend, when I was in middle school, he found a way to get onto his dad's cable channels that were really only supposed to be for his dad. Why a married man? His dad was married at the time. Why he should be accessing like these porn channels, I don't. That's a whole other issue. Again, if it was illegal, he couldn't do it. I'm not saying it would have saved their marriage, but it wouldn't have gotten in the hands of me and my friend at 11 years old and watching porn in the summer. At 11 years old, I want you to think about that. 11 years old. We hadn't really even hit puberty yet, maybe in a year or two. All I knew is when I was watching, it was exciting. I didn't even know why I was excited, but it was exciting. I felt weird, but it was exciting. 11 years old. And that was back in, the 90s? Early 90s? You can imagine then what kids younger than 11 have accessed and have ruined themselves, completely burned themselves out. You want to know why our society is broken? That's one of the big reasons. Pornography. It absolutely must be illegal. Shamed, frowned upon. I mean, it's really in the same category as pedophilia, because when you film something, you do not know who every single person, who your audience is. That's what I said with prostitution. You know who your audience is. You know who's involved, and they're in a room. But with pornography, it could be anybody at any time in history. You could have an 8-year-old 50 years from now watching this stuff. Absolutely, it should be illegal. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I can think of. Gay Island was a pretty funny one, though. I like Gay Island. It's a fun idea. I don't know how well some of these ideas would go, but I have to put them all out there because I believe that they're the best solution to a actual problem. Gay Island. That's right. I'm trying to think what else. Yeah, the draft, illegal. Man, it's just... Oh, yeah, drugs. So this is an interesting one. This is a touchy one, too. Almost not even worth mentioning if it decreases the odds of some of these more important things getting through. So hard drugs should always be illegal. I don't care what any of these ridiculous people say. If you allowed everybody to have access to meth, your society will just die. Just period. There's no sane person would be like, yeah, anybody should have access to cocaine or meth or anything like that. Yeah, good luck with that society. People do not have self-control, as we've learned through the internet. There is no self-control. Your society will tank. You have to have hard drugs that always be illegal. We were not meant to... They are harmful to a person and to a society. Period. Illegal. I've never used marijuana. I have had alcohol before. I have been really close to drunk once. Lightheaded. I guess it's buzzed. I've never been much of a drinker. My mom was alcoholic, though. I saw the evils of alcoholism, right? And you hear about all these DUIs where people lose loved ones and stuff. And so it makes you wonder, did they get it right with the whole prohibition thing? It doesn't work if one state has it legal and the other state doesn't, because then the people were, I lived in Kentucky for a while. So all they did when it was illegal in Kentucky was they just went to Tennessee to get their alcohol, and then they came back. And so they were losing state taxes in those sales. And so what I'm saying is alcohol would have to be something that is legal or illegal across the country for it to even have an effect. Otherwise, you just go to another state. I have never really seen the effects of marijuana, from what I've seen, don't seem to be actually as harmful as alcohol. I just want to say that. There are fewer people killed while under the influence of marijuana as opposed to alcohol. Is there any domestic violence? I don't know. They're too dang high to be violent, I guess. I don't know. But with alcohol and domestic violence, it's another aggravator there. So alcohol is an example of something that is harmful to a person and society. And again, a lot of people cannot regulate themselves. The other alternative to making alcohol illegal is just making the consequences for alcohol-related crimes to be more severe. But I was just drunk. Well, you took the risk. Like, we allowed alcohol to be illegal to our own, probably, dismay, to maybe our own detriment, our shame that we allowed it to be illegal in the first place. But they are the ones who did the crime and they abused it. And so, I don't know, maybe the consequences just need to be more severe. Make an example out of them so people are really afraid to even drink alcohol. I know, some people will, but that's fine. They'll be kept out of society, no longer able to harm society. I've seen a lot of those those cop videos, where they pull different people over all the time and you see all the different reactions and stuff. And there's been a couple of them that are really bothersome. Some of them were just like, even when they weren't even really that drunk anymore, they just didn't care that they just like ran over two people and killed them while being drunk. And they don't even care. They're asking more like, well, am I going to be able to go to work tomorrow? Do I got to call off? Like, you ended two people's lives, and all you can think about is if you are going to lose your job or not. Yeah, life. You're never going to be in our society again. Bye. You murdered two people. Life. Goodbye. You're going to crack rocks for the rest of your life is all I can say. And they're going to say, but I was just drunk. You should not have been drunk. This is one of those questions where it's where you try to weigh it out between, should alcohol be illegal or should it be legal, and the consequences of being drunk, should that be just more severe? And that's what I mean. I never understood that one too. There'd be people in jail for possession of marijuana. Are you kidding me? When I was in high school in the 90s, everybody was smoking weed. Freaking everybody except me basically was smoking weed. You always knew this friend or that friend. If you ever wanted marijuana or ever wanted to try it, you know which friend to go to. They all had weed. Weed was as common as it got. If come on. Oh, fornication. Yeah, I didn't talk about that. Yeah, I want to talk about this one now because everyone in high school was all having sex with everyone, and this is wrong. This is why you have so many childless fathers. This is why you have so many women who can't pair bond. The problem is that people are still going to do it. The root of this is not the lack of laws. This is a cultural decay. I know this. So let me give a perspective here. My grandparents were born in the 20s. That's right. My grandpa was 20 years old when he went to World War II as a Marine infantry, sent to the Pacific Islands. Fun, right? He was born in the 20s. He got married to my grandma at 20 years old just before going over to World War II. He survived World War II. He came back. They were married for 40 years, and then he died of a heart attack at 59 years old just before he turned 60. So they were married together for 40 years. They were virgins. They were not with anyone else before they got married. They had a successful marriage with 4 kids and 40 years of successful marriage. They were nice people. My grandma is my favorite person. She's like from a whole other kind of world. I can't even explain it. They had a relationship that was based off of love and trust and selflessness. So what I'm saying here is they didn't have fornication laws back there. People just didn't do it. It was a cultural thing. It was shamed. For whatever reason, they just didn't do it back then. And it's most likely due to the fact that women especially would be shamed for being promiscuous. Since women have control over sex, men don't. Men will say yes to everything. Women are the gatekeepers of sex, period. It's so much easier for a woman to get sex than man. So if a woman is just saying yes to everybody, she's the reason why society is just going down the toilet. Other women feel compelled to loosen up their standards if they want to compete. Everyone just loosens up and the whole society just slips away. My parents also, to my knowledge, I know my mom for sure, but I believe also my dad, also virgins when they got married. My mom was 19 and my dad was 27. They were both virgins. They were also not with other people before they got married. They were married for 25 years, and then my mom passed away at the age of 44. But what I'm saying here is that was another example of how a marriage that lasted until death do you part. And fornication was not an issue. Neither was adultery in either of the two situations. Then there's my generation, right? Wrecked. We are wrecked. Everyone my age has been through like a bunch of divorces, got kids with different people. Everybody's sleeping with everybody. It's lawless. It's ridiculous. This is a wrecked society. Okay? We are not a strong society that is breeding healthy and stable children. We are breeding confused, angry, and just unstable children is what we're doing. which creates for an unstable society. Now, there were never any laws against fornication in the time of my grandparents or my parents, so that makes me think, well, then what good are laws going to do now? It wasn't laws that kept them from doing it. It was just a cultural thing, a shaming thing. We need to bring shaming back. This isn't a law suggestion. This is just an idea that we need to bring shaming back. Shaming keeps society from being shameful. And do you know what actually helps, or you know what actually allows shaming to come back? Is if you actually enforced your First Amendment of the United States, you jerks. So this brings me to the next change that needs to happen, which is companies like YouTube or any other company that wants to operate in the United States has to respect people's civil rights in a public and shared space. They say, well, it's our own little company. We could do what I want. That's not even the same as a person walking into someone else's house. If you walk into someone else's house, then you have to abide by the rules or they can ask you to leave. So if they say, please take your shoes off at the front door, and you don't, they can then decide if they want you to be removed by the police. So that's an example of something that's a private space. But when you've got these companies like YouTube that are on a public space, shared space, we all agree that it is a shared space, and they violate people's civil rights. This should be enforceable. You should be able to sue YouTube every time they have their little guidelines over superseding that of the U.S. Constitution. How any company is allowed to do this in America is beyond me. Our civil rights are constantly violated. Constantly. Now, this is going to open up some gray areas because the first thing that comes to mind is people say, well, then if you're working for a company, then you could sexually harass somebody verbally. And I'm saying, yeah. Now, back in the day, you know why people wouldn't do it? Because the woman would usually just slap the guy, and that'd be the end of it. He crossed over a line. He got a little bit of a, good little slap there. And, and also the coworkers would shame him. They didn't need rules back then. They just took care of it themselves. That guy is just a shameful guy. His prospects for promotion now go down. He's most likely going to get fired when they're looking to fire somebody. You don't need rules for that stuff. We have always been able to take care of this stuff on our own. But I've said this many times that the whole racism subject and sexual harassment, I believe, was used in this country to destroy free speech. Everything is always flagged by a good cause. Everything is started in a good cause. We're just trying to end racism. We're trying to end sexual harassment. But then what they're not looking at is you unless you're in your living room, can't even speak your own mind anymore. You can't even speak your own mind on a public space like YouTube anymore. Because for whatever reason, your civil rights don't really matter. Free speech doesn't really matter. So if free speech was actually enforced, you could bring shaming back. Let's make shaming great again, right? It almost looks like a t-shirt, with a little finger, kind of going left to right, like naughty. Let's make shaming great again. And then have it be like a 304. The finger's going no to a 304. I don't know, something like that. But shaming needs to come back. I think that would probably be more effective than just putting a law if fornication was a misdemeanor. The whole idea of fornication being a misdemeanor was then there's at least more of a benefit to entering into marriage, because then you can have sex legally, but sex outside of marriage, because of the costs and harm it does to society when people make bastard children. There should be a cost to the individuals committing it. And this makes sense. There is a logic to this, believe it or not. I'm not just trying to make up rules to make people's lives more frustrating. I'm looking at it like this. Our hookup culture, where everybody's sleeping with everyone, is making tons of children, or even costing the system. Oh, abortion. I forgot to mention abortion. Okay, so abortion is a touchy one. I personally do not think that it is right. And how they're able to make taxpayers pay for an operation like that is beyond me. A state should be allowed to vote on whether it's legal or not in their state. So if a person wants to get abortion, they would have to find a state where it is legal. They have to pay for it themselves. They cannot get taxpayers to pay for the abortion for them. There should, meaning, hey, you have a financial incentive to stop using abortion as birth control. And the other thing is, it should be legally required that a person has to tie their tubes to get the abortion. So you are limited to one abortion, period. My only concern about this is The rape issue. You're going to have lots of false. Oh, there's one I hadn't talked about. Yeah, false accusation. Yeah, before I forget. If somebody accuses something of something that's not true, they should have to face the same consequences if it's found that they were a fraud, if it was found that they knew it wasn't true or they didn't really know. People say, well, that'll discourage people from reporting it. Well, report it if it's true. Report it if it's true, because the opposite is a nightmare. It's also one of the reasons why men don't want anything to do with women anymore. All these false claims from women and the whole believe all women movement, thinking that women can't lie. Are you kidding me? People being convicted without evidence only to be found not guilty decades later. It's madness. So that's something I've always believed was needed, was if somebody accuses somebody of something, they should be willing to face the same consequences themselves if the person is found not guilty. How strong is the evidence to your case? If they did it and you know it and you can prove it, then you don't have anything to worry about and they're going to go to prison. But if they didn't do it and you know it, guess what? You're going to prison when they're found not guilty. There needs to be something done about all of this rampant false accusation. So, yeah, I just wanted to mention that before I continue with the other subject. Fornication, right? It's hard to enforce. I thought that fornication might be best if it was a self-reported form of thing. So where the first person to report the fornication gets less of a sentence. Self-reporting is very strong. So that way the only people who would really be able to get away with fornicating is people who completely trust each other. But as for one stranger hooking up with another, nope. They wouldn't trust the other person enough. And what would happen is they'd end up paying all these fines, like $500 fine, whatever, for their little fornication charge. What this money goes towards is it goes towards everything else that society has to burden and pay for because of people in hookup culture having sex just randomly and recklessly. The whole idea of a marriage is it's supposed to be a protected union and a safe place to have children. You have two people who are now designated as the parents of any children that are made through that sex, and it is a place of where people are responsible for it. But with hookup culture, no one's responsible. The state, everyone else basically has to pay for these people making children. Now, I know the women will go after the man for child support from the man. That's a whole other subject too. Yeah, it needs to be legally required to have a paternity test in order to draw child support from anybody. I've heard so many nightmare stories about men who've been paying child support for like 10, 15, 20 years, and then they do a paternity test finally, and they find out he's not the dad. And you know what's sick? They don't even get their money back. The state just says, well, whoopsie. No, none of that. In order to gather child support, a paternity test must be produced. In fact, I'm almost thinking that every child, when they are born, should automatically be given a paternity test to the father. Because you know how many women are out there having children with other men, and the man they're with doesn't know it and raises someone else's child their whole life and doesn't know it until much later, and it's devastating. The truth needs to come out earlier. Plus, then she can then actually go after the actual father for the child support rather than making this poor guy pay for someone else's child. This is a severe problem in our society that mainstream does not talk about, that I've heard enough about to know that there need to be some serious changes in this. Paternity tests really should be done at birth every time. And if you don't have a paternity test, you can't get child support, period. That's it. But there's a lot of times where the woman is not able to get child support because the man is either already in jail or just a bum, has no money to take. And so what happens is the state will end up through, welfare programs paying for their promiscuity. And that is what I mean when I say there's money going out because of this behavior, yet no money coming in from the people who are doing the behavior. And so if it was a misdemeanor, then at least statistically, you'd be gathering, a $400 to $500 penalty for being found guilty of fornication. It would at least be offsetting some of the bills and the costs of all these bastard children. The real way of solving this is through shaming and through making sure people just weren't the kind of people to want to do this. That's really the thing. I'm just trying to find ways to minimize the damage of it, assuming it's going to happen, But anyway, I'm most happy about the asset limit. And the two other ones would be pornography being illegal and adultery being a felony. I think these are the three most important things that I've said in this. If everyone else did not pass and did not get through, but these three passed, we would gradually see, and really in some cases immediately see, very positive effects. Someone's going to say, everyone's going to be in jail. Everyone who's been running society down. So, yeah, that is a funny problem, is what happens when all of society is going to be in jail. The funny irony is we're already kind of living in a jail. Everybody's enslaved to their job. Like everybody, I mean, I don't know how it could really get much. If anything, it'd be helping them, right? Because the way jails are now is it's easier than working and paying rent, just being in jail. You know, so I mean, they'll probably be like, "Man, I'm so glad I got found guilty for adultery. I don't have to work anymore." But anyway, no. On a serious note, though, those are the three major ones that I think are the most important. So, until next time.